have a debate happening with Spaz and Footsoldier. For this debate, Spaz is taking the position that there are at least some natural numbers that we can't specifically refer to. Footsoldier's taking the opposition, as always when we're based upon who concedes. But also, if we don't reach a vocal concession from either participant, for this debate it's going to be a bit different. So I want everybody to pay attention to the win condition that was specified in the announcement. So the win condition for Footsoldier is if Spaz holds two or more contradictory positions and or cannot provide evidence for the claim he's making. So if it does come down to a voting poll, you should be basing your vote off that statement. So if you feel that Spaz Footsoldier has exposed Spaz as holding two or more contradictory positions, or he's shown that Spaz cannot provide evidence for the claim, you should vote for Footsoldier. If you feel like Footsoldier has not done that, or he was not successful in showing that, then you should vote for Spaz. Thank you both for debating. You can get started.
Okay,
Nice.
cool. So, for my opening statement, I'm just going to make my case as simply as I can.
Okay.
I think the simplest argument that I can make for my claim is just this. Any finite string or any finite piece of communication is going to have a finite amount of bits of information contained. And any finite amount of bits of information can, just by definition, can only have a finite amount of variations. So even though there's an infinite number of integers, obviously, there's only a finite amount of variations for the maximum amount of information that can theoretically be communicated from one agent in this universe to another. And there seems to be a very simple conceptual case that given that there are only a finite amount of variations and possible communications that can occur between one agent and another, but there are an infinite number of natural numbers, there must be at least some natural numbers that can't be said to be referred to, as in they can't be picked out from the rest of the infinite set of natural numbers with any finitely long string or any finitely long encoding method. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, sure. I'll repeat an example back to you so you can see if I've understood it. So let's say we get a number so incredibly large that if we tried to communicate this number, it would be so long we would be unable to communicate it within a lifetime. So nobody is able to.
Yes,
understand.
that's exactly the idea.
Right.
But the only caveat
I think he's cut out. Is it me, Stone, or is it him?
No, it was definitely him. Spaz, you cut out. I'll also ping him in chat real quick so he knows.
Okay.
Okay, it's my connection. You hear me now?
Yeah.
My connection's apparently a little bit spotty.
No worries.
So I will, if that happens again, just ping me or whatever.
Now, what I would say is, I understand the concept of infinity as some vague, abstract thing which we can use in a useful way to do complex mathematical equations with. But in terms of numbers, I am an anti-realist when it comes to numbers, right? So when we're children and we learn to count, we learn to count 1 apple, 2 apples, 3 apples, 4, and these types of things, because we have the apples in front of us, or we can visualize the apples and we can visualize the number. So how numbers work from the point of view of a human or anyone capable or any mind capable of conceptualizing numeracy, we are indexing objects in the world and synthesizing the concept in our minds. So if there is a number, let's say the number 100, we need to be able to conceptualize this number or be able to refer to some abstract idea of this number in order for that number to exist. Because although infinity is infinite, infinity is a definable thing that we can conceptualize. We can't conceptualize what the actual quantitative value of infinity is in a tangible way, because it doesn't make sense, right, to do so. But we understand infinity in an abstract sort of idea. We sort of understand what is meant, and we can use it in equations sort of way. If we divide by 0 or something like this, then we're gonna end up with some understanding of infinity being just ever increasingly large. But in terms of numbers actually existing, I don't think there's any such thing as a number in the world. We only synthesize the concepts of numbers in our mind, and we index that to having learnt things like 1 apple, 2 apples, 3 apples in school. So to say that there exists a number beyond perception is to say that we can have something mind dependent, right? But it cannot exist in a mind. But if it's mind dependent and it cannot exist in a mind, then you've got a contradiction. The only other thing that you could say would be, no, you're wrong, Footsoldier. You can be an anti-realist all you want, but you're mistaken. Numbers are real. In which case, I'll just ask you to provide evidence of the realness of numbers.
Okay, cool. So just to be clear, is the position you're taking that you agree that there are numbers that can't be referred to, but your contention is that those numbers can't be said to exist
And
because they're mind dependent fundamentally, and so if they don't exist in a mind, they can't be said to exist at all.
Well, there's something I want to clarify from what you just said. So you said, do I mean that there are numbers but they can't exist? No, I take the word or the words "there are" to mean there exists, right? So when we say there exists a number 3, yeah, there exists a number 3 in my mind as a concept in my mind that's being synthesized. I'm synthesizing a number 3 right now. I can even see it in my mind's eye right now, the form of the written 3. Or I could see 3 dots. I could see 3 apples in my mind right now. I'm synthesizing the concept. But to say that a number exists independent of my mind or independent of anyone's mind is to say that there is an abstract thing which is necessarily mind dependent, which cannot exist in a mind, which is a contradiction.
Okay, so I think I can work with that. Would you agree, even if a particular number doesn't exist in anyone's mind, would you agree that we can say it exists if we seem to also believe in other numbers and mathematical facts that would necessitate that it would exist? Like, let's say we know that the number, I don't know, I'll give a number like 543,268. We know that that number must have a square, but we probably don't know what it is. Would you be willing to grant that that number exists?
What do you mean
In
it
this,
exists? Like someone's thought of it, like that number someone is currently thinking about in their mind right now, or there just exists a solution to that math problem?
yes, right. There exists a solution to that problem.
Right. Well, I can I can attempt to solve the problem, right? And then when I solve the problem, I'll synthesize the number in my mind, right? But that number isn't like waiting like under a book somewhere hidden from view. If only I could find it, then the number would exist.
Okay, so you would say that it does exist because there can be said to be a fact of the matter about what it is,
No,
even
well,
if we don't.
if that concept isn't currently in my mind, it's not currently existing. So if no one right now is thinking of the number 54328 7 or whatever you said a minute ago, then that number doesn't exist, right? Because numbers aren't real. Numbers are mind dependent. So like I know it's tempting to say that there's this abstract subsistent realm of platonic numbers, somewhere. There's in Plato's store cupboards. There's a drawer with all of the numbers in it. But this, I would say, if you think that, that's cool, and I would be interested in just getting evidence of Plato's store cupboard and this drawer.
Okay. So would you be willing to grant, if I say that we can conceptualize a number 10, would you be willing to grant that numbers 1 through 9 exist by implication of number 10 existing?
If I think that, then they exist in my mind as they're synthesized. When I'm no longer thinking about them, they cease to exist.
Okay. And so if I were to just pull sort of a cheeky move and say something like, well, the axioms of piano arithmetic seem to just directly talk about numbers existing. Or let's say, I think the axioms of like ZFC also just directly talk about existence as being a property of numbers and of sets. Or I don't know, I think numbers, just sets.
Well, in
And
mathematics,
so we can say, sort of by definition, within the sort of language game of math, numbers exist, even if nobody is thinking about them.
right, so we've got two different things occurring. So I'll grant you that within the language game of maths, we have stuff called imaginary numbers and real numbers and natural numbers and rational numbers and all sorts of numbers. But these are just more concepts, right? These are concepts. So for us to say that a unicorn exists, what we mean is we have a picture of a horse in our mind and we superglue a horn on it and make it magical or something. And then we've synthesized that concept in our mind and now it exists for a moment in our mind. But if we stop thinking about it, then it ceases to exist. But if we're talking about imaginary and real numbers in the language game of maths, just calling them real numbers doesn't make them real. If I say Harry Potter is real in Harry Potter, like Harry Potter really does do magic in Harry Potter. I'm not saying that Harry Potter actually exists, right, in some way, in the real world. I'm just saying when Harry Potter is in my mind doing, I can't remember, Wingardium Leviosa or something. In my mind, I'm seeing him right now in my mind doing Wingardium Leviosa, and the feather is flying around the classroom in the first Harry Potter film. It really does exist right now in my mind, right? But the second I stop thinking about Harry Potter, then is no longer existing in my mind, and if he's not existing in anyone else's mind, then it doesn't exist, right? So we wouldn't say that Harry Potter really does. Like, if you just went to Scotland, you could find a castle somewhere with Harry Potter performing spells. Like, no one would think that, right? So, either we need to provide evidence of Harry Potter or provide evidence of the real numbers in Plato's store cupboard, or we need to think, okay, well, they they don't exist, right? So when I don't think of this number, if I can't conceptualize this number, then it doesn't exist. And if I can't conceptualize it, then uh, then it doesn't exist. Or if I can conceptualize it, then we can refer to it. So I don't see how you can meet. I don't see how you can defend your position for those reasons.
Okay. So I assume you would also grant, let's say if I type a random string of digits into the chat box right now without looking at it,
Yeah.
which I've just done. And obviously I didn't look at it. Nobody else has either. So we have a number that doesn't exist in the mind of any human. And
Yeah, it's
won't
not a number.
necessarily ever. All I have to do is just press backspace a few times, and I can guarantee that it never will exist in the mind of a human.
Right, but it's not a number. It's just like bits on a computer, right?
Okay, so you would be
And
willing to say right now that there is no number.
ha-
Like there's no, but if I talk about, say, the number that will appear if I press the word in, or I press the enter key right now,
there will
what
be a
I'm,
number the second anyone looks at it and understands the number. But if you do a really long number, press enter, it appears on my screen. I look at it, that number doesn't exist. That exact number doesn't exist in my mind yet because I haven't understood the number, because it's too long for me to understand what that number is. I probably couldn't. It probably would never exist in my mind, that number, because unless I memorized that number, but it would maybe take me a week because my memory is really bad. If I finally did memorize it, then I'll be like, that number exists in my mind right now. But I still probably wouldn't be able to conceptualize it or anything. But I would say, okay, yes, that number does exist in my mind right now. We can point to things which look like numbers, but you don't know what the number is. If I write the number 100 in the chat box and paste that, you'll see it. And instantly we'll say, oh, 100. I recognize 100. I understand what 100 is. I've seen 100 things before. I know what 100 means in my mind. 100 exists in my mind right now, and I can see that the number 100 exists. But until you've understood what it is, it's just pixels on a computer screen or bits in a computer, and that's not a number. That's bits.
Okay, cool. And so you would probably agree that the numbers we can conceptualize, as the number gets larger, the amount of time and effort it's going to take to conceptualize it is going to grow, not monotonically, but it's going to grow, generally speaking, right?
Right. I've got no problem with saying,
So if I
you
will,
give me.
okay.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
that was just, I'm sorry, that was just like a really quick rhetorical question. You would agree
Sure.
that it grows, but non-monotonically. So there would probably be sub-numbers, like let's say the number 1,000,000, that you can conceptualize, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a concept of every number between 1 and 1,000,000, right?
Well, if the second we start talking about a specific number, let's say I say, oh, what is the square root of 25? And I haven't done the calculation for a while, and I'm like, is it 5? Yeah, I think it's 5. Now I'm thinking of 5. In my mind, 5 exists. But if no one's ever done that calculation before, and no one knew what the square root was, then we wouldn't say that there exists secretly a number somewhere hidden in the numeral realm. If only we could pluck it from the numeral realm and expose this number, the secret number that was lying behind our perception. Like that, if you want to say that this type of numeracy exists, I'm fine with that, but you've just got to provide evidence of it.
Okay. So just to clarify, this is a really basic question I'm asking, which is, let's say we grant that I have a conception of number n. Do you think the conception of number n necessitates a conception? I mean, let's say if we grant that n exists, are we granting that every number between n and 0 exists?
I can't conceptualize those numbers, so I'm not gonna commit myself to saying they're in my mind when they're not in my
Okay,
mind, right?
right. So you're saying specifically that you don't think you need to grant that they exist to grant that the number that's greater than them also exists.
Well, it's like from your perspective, you're sitting right now in front of your computer, and there's lots of numbers, quote unquote, happening behind the workings of your computer. The operating system, whether you're using Windows, Mac, Linux, I don't know what you're using, but you've probably got thousands, if not like just a very large amount of variables going on right now in the operating of your computer, the operating system, Discord, with lots and lots and lots of representations and lots of algebraic stuff like calculus and left, right, and center math going on. But we wouldn't say that if we opened up our computer, we would see numbers in there. But we would say that if a number popped up on the screen, we would say, oh, look, that's a number. Oh, it's the number 25. Oh, it's the number 300. I've got that in my mind. Yeah, that we can see that number. I know what you mean by that number. But if you can't refer to the number because it's so large that it's infinitely large, and you're just going to give me a number that it would take my longer than my entire lifetime to communicate to me, then what you're saying is um, this number exists, but no one knows it, right? But if it's mind dependent, if numbers are mind dependent, but it's not in any mind, then it cannot exist. Because it would be contradictory to say otherwise, unless you're a realist in respect to numbers and you can provide evidence that no, this really long number does exist. Here it is. I can point to it. Here it is. Look, it's behind the curtain here. Right? If you can provide evidence of that kind, then I'll concede the debate. But if you can tell me how it's not contradiction to say that something is which is mind dependent, but cannot exist in a mind, how that isn't somehow incoherent, then I would also concede the debate. But unless you do those two things, you've got a problem on your hands for the debate.
Okay. So let's say that I say there is this number, which is the smallest number that can't be specified. Would you agree that it's when I just say something? Well, when I just say this phrase, well, the smallest number that can't be specified. If there is a fact of the matter about what number I'm talking about, we can say that that conception or the conception of that number does exist in my mind.
Are you going to ask me what the smallest natural number is? Because
No. This is what I'm going to ask you.
Go ahead.
What I'm going to ask is this. Let's say I want to talk in the abstract about numbers that can't be specified. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I do it non-specifically. Like I could say, there are numbers. Just say for the sake of argument that a googolplex is a number that's too large to specify.
We just specified it.
Right. No, I'm saying just for the sake of argument because we obviously can't talk about the actual numbers that can't be specified.
But I don't know
So-
what it means to say.
Just
Oh,
for
here's a number.
okay, just
Here's
hear
an
me out.
example of a number which we can't specify, but I've just specified. I don't know what it means.
Well, since we can't specify it, I'm just saying pretend, for the sake of argument, that a googolplex is the non-specificable number.
I'll try.
And then say, for the sake of argument, that we can refer to, I'll say, 10 times a googolplex, or 10 to the power of a googolplex. We might want to say that if I talk about, say, oh, well, what about all the numbers between this number and that number that we can't refer to? Because I can talk about it and I can make statements about it, like, well, we can even make vague estimations of how many of those numbers there are. We can say that a concept of these numbers exists in our minds, even though we're not able to refer specifically to one in such a way that there's a fact of the number, there's a fact of the matter about which specific number is being referred to. We still have a concept, and we can still do work with that concept.
Right. Well, if I could just ask you, imagine a unicorn. Imagine a unicorn that has 8 kidneys. Imagine plunging your hand into its abdomen and pulling out one of the kidneys and smelling it. Can you smell the aroma of the unicorn kidney? Right? You might be able to think you might be able to think, "Oh, well, I'm thinking 12 years ago or whenever I was last buying meat." I think it was probably 13, 14 years ago now that I was last in a butcher shop. I remember the smell of like kidneys and offal, and I could probably think, what would happen if I plunged my hand into the abdomen of a unicorn and pulled out one of these 8 kidneys and smelt it? It will probably smell like this, right? But because it's a unicorn, it might be slightly more sugary or something, right? We can talk about all these things, but that doesn't mean that anything that I'm saying exists, or like just we're synthesizing it in our mind. So it does exist in our mind, but it's contingent on minds to conceptualize and talk about. We can talk about anything we like. We can talk about the rocks on the top of Mount Everest that I've never been to. I'm imagining Mount Everest and I'm imagining the rocks right now. We can say there's 8 rocks that I'm looking at right now in my mind's eye that were on the top of Mount Everest and I've never been there. But the thing is, you can't then say that they have some realist ontology, right? And we can talk about these things, right, and then they exist, right? So I'm going to ask where they exist if they're not in the mind. But if you say, okay, well, they are in the mind, well, then if we're going to say numbers only exist in the mind, then you can't then say we can't refer to them, because if you can't refer to them, they could not possibly be in the mind, and then they wouldn't exist. So then we wouldn't have any numbers that exist that are in the mind. So at this point, what I would do is just write out the propositions which you're currently holding, which are in internal contradiction, and then I will just put that to you. So one sec, I'll just collect that and put it in the chat.
Okay, cool.
So I've just put it in debate chat. So I find that propositions 1 and 2 would be the first thing that you would have to overcome. So you're saying that numbers are not mind dependent, but evidence for the realism of numbers cannot be provided. So either you agree that numbers are mind dependent, or you'd have to provide that evidence. And propositions 3 and 4 are like, a mind cannot conceptualize these numbers, but there are at least some natural numbers that we can't specifically refer to. Well, if they're mind dependent, then we would have to have them in our mind to be able to refer to them, because if otherwise they weren't in our mind, then they wouldn't exist. So then the P4 fails. So all of these, they're tightly related, but they're internally contradictory, and you're holding all of these currently. So unless you want to concede the debate at this point, could you please try and reject one of these propositions?
Okay, so let me try. I guess I could take two routes. One would be trying to provide evidence for the realism of numbers, but I think that's just going to be too difficult. So I'll just grant non-realism for the sake of argument. I do think I can explain why P3 and P4 aren't contradictory. And the way I do that is I say, well, okay, let's say that numbers are mind dependent. It doesn't necessarily follow that for a number to be said to exist, even if it does have to be inside of a mind, it doesn't necessarily follow that it has to be inside of a mind in a specific state. It could be that numbers exist inside of the mind in an abstract way, or we could say that we're conceptualizing them just sort of by implication.
Right, I've got no problem with that though, right? Because you said earlier, like, imagine a Googleplex,
Right.
and imagine we couldn't refer to it, or imagine we couldn't conceptualize it. Well, no, we are, because you just told me. Like, I
Right.
can't know in my mind what a Googleplex of apples would look like, because that's too large for me to conceptualize. But we can refer to it because you've just done so. So if you say there's
Okay.
this very,
Well,
very, very large number called wow or something like this, then you've just referred to it.
right. So I have referred to it, but let's say that I referred to it, but the only way I had of referring to it also referred to, say, two other numbers. I
I
think at
don't know
that
what you
point,
mean to say that. If it's a
okay, well,
number, well, how can a number be two other numbers?
let's say that there's a number that can be referred to, but it can't be specified, as in we don't have enough bits of information to specify it against some other set of at least one number.
Well, I've already given you an example of that, and it's infinity. So we can just say, look, infinity, this is something that exists in my mind as an abstract concept, that no other number is larger than it because it's infinitely large. I can't conceptualize infinite apples, but I can conceptualize this abstract concept of infinity as some sort of pragmatic tool in the mathematic toolbox that I can use in like calculus or some other stuff to do cool stuff. It's not to say that what infinity refers to exists, because that doesn't exist, of course, right? There's no one natural number which is infinity. That's the point of infinity. But we can refer to some abstract concept. Now, that doesn't get you to say that there is some number which is too large for us to refer to, because then we can just refer to it as large number.
Okay, cool. So I think your position would seem to entail a couple absurdities, or the standards that you're using for what would make a number real seem to entail, I can see at least two absurdities. One of the absurdities is the one that I mentioned earlier, that I can write down a number that's just clearly legible on a piece of paper or on a computer screen and just not show it to anyone. And let's say I also forget about it. Then even though I literally just have a piece of paper with a number written on it that anyone can understand if they just look for 1 second, then the number that is on that piece of paper doesn't exist.
Well,
Which,
it's a representation of a number, right? So
right? Okay,
you
so
can make
we're saying it's a representation of something that doesn't exist.
we're saying that it's just marks on a page, and when
Right.
we speak, we're making noises, right? In order for that to be interpretable, to be coherent, and for me to understand, for it to be intelligible, I need to then associate your marks or noises with the concept in my mind. So then I synthesize the concept of 100 in my mind when I see the number 100 that you've written down on your piece of paper that you've forgotten about when I see it. But to say that no, on the piece of paper was actually a number. It's a real 100 was on this paper, in the actual realness of the number 100 was in existence on this piece of paper. I don't think anyone who thinks about it for more than 5 seconds is actually going to affirm that. They're going to say no, you just wrote down, there's pen, there's ink on some paper, on some, like someone chopped down a tree and like mashed it up with pulp and then like steamrolled it and produced like a white sheet, and then we used ink marks on it to scribble like some markings, and when I look at that, I associate that in my mind as the concept of 100. No one's going to say no, actually there actually was 100 in the 100 was hidden in the paper. Like, no one's going to say that in a realist sense. It doesn't really seem to make sense.
Okay, but let's say I semantically refer to the number that I wrote down. You would agree that there is a fact of the matter about what number is being referred to, or no?
Well, if you write down a number, it's in your mind because you've written it down.
Okay,
You've
right.
written it down.
So we've already said, right, I forget or I wasn't looking when I wrote it.
Right. Yeah.
What
So
I'm saying is, I
it,
have a
it
number written down that doesn't exist in any human mind. And I say, hey, Footsoldier, let's say we're going to play a guessing game. Can you guess what number I wrote down? On your view, the answer would be that you have not just like a limited chance of guessing, but you have no chance of guessing. Because by definition, any number that you could possibly guess couldn't be a number that's equal to something that is not an existing number.
what I would say would be, no, let's say you had a number in your head. You
Okay.
represented that number using marks on a sheet of paper. You then put that in a safety deposit box and came back to it 100 years, well, 50 years later, let's say, and you wanted to say, yes, 50 years ago to this day, I wrote down a number in this safety deposit box, and I've forgotten what it is. Will you like to guess it with me? And then they like, there's a couple of people in the room, and they're all like guessing numbers, and then they write down numbers that they guess the number is going to be, right? And then the safety deposit box is opened, they reveal the number, and they say, this was the number I was thinking of when I wrote this down here. I wrote this number down 50 years ago today, and who was the closest? Did anyone guess it? Now, what's happened there is the number itself, the actual essence of the real essence of the number was not hidden in the safety deposit box. It was a representation on a piece of paper using ink markings of a number that you had in your head, or that you wrote down randomly even at the time of writing it down. And then we're asking the question, do our guesses of what the number could be correspond to what the number was when you wrote it down, as evidenced by the piece of paper, right? It's not like we're saying, no, there actually does exist that number in the safety deposit box, right? The number itself doesn't exist there. The representation of the number exists because the number itself was in your mind.
Right. And so you also, I think you have some particular standard for how well a number has to be represented in your mind to count as an existing number, right?
Needs to be coherent. So Googleplex, I have no idea what the
Okay. So you would even say a Googleplex doesn't exist.
No. Googleplex does, because you've just told me Googleplex, and I know that's a really long. I think it's got 100 zeros, isn't it?
Right.
Right.
Well, no,
So I know.
it's like a that's a Google.
So
But
you've communicated a concept with me, just like I can communicate with you the concept of plunging my hand into the abdomen of a unicorn and pulling out a kidney and smelling it, right? It's such a bizarre thing, right? Because like, how could you smell something that doesn't exist? But we can in our mind's eye, right? And the same thing I can do with the Googleplex. You can talk about Google plexes, and it's this fantastical number with like 100 zeros. I don't know what it would look like if we had a Googleplex of apples, but I just know it's really long, right? And it's got 100 zeros, and you've communicated that to me successfully. So we've referred to it, and it's fine.
okay, cool. But if I say 100 zeros, then what I'm technically doing, I mean, you could say that what that technically is just a set of instructions for producing a Googleplex, right? Like you would have to take a conception of 10 and then multiply it by 10 100 times, and then you would get a Googleplex. Or no, not a, you would get a Google.
You could you could say that there's some sort of like instruction manual to
Right.
achieve whatever
Well,
number you want. You could say that the number that I'm thinking of right now, or the number that I want you to reach, is 8 to the power of 14 divided by 7 or something. And
okay.
I have no idea what that would be. We could
So,
work it out, and the second we worked it out, we would see the number and be like, "Oh, that's the answer. There's the number."
okay, cool. So what you're committed to then is the view that there isn't any fact of the matter about what the answer to that question is, unless somebody currently is thinking about, uh, unless somebody is currently thinking about it, or no.
Well, what do you mean by fact of the matter unless someone's
Like
currently thinking
there
about it?
is no truth about what the, or say what number is specified by, what'd you say, 8 to the power of 14 divided by 7. Like there's no such number unless somebody calculates it and then writes down the digits and then memorizes and then memorizes the digits they wrote down. Until that happens, then there's no such number.
Or until a result is produced and
Right. So
seen.
earlier, I just want to be clear about this. Earlier, you were saying that not only does there have to be a result, but it has to be like fully conceptualized by a human brain.
It's not like we have to fully conceptualize, but we have to understand coherently what is being conveyed. Right? That's what I'm talking about. Because if you're just gonna show me a number that is so large that I can't comprehend this number, right? I can look at it, but it's like, wow, that number's really big. I don't know what I haven't understood the number yet, right?
Okay.
Um,
But so even if you understand how the number behaves, actually, let's say I go to the example of a number or like an irrational number like pi, where it's obviously going to be impossible to memorize the digits of pi. And it's going to be impossible to visualize any sort of like series expansion of pi. But we can still talk about what pi is in terms of how it relates to something else. Like it's the ratio of circumference to diameter or whatever.
yeah,
Do you
we
think?
can
Yeah.
we can work out what pi is.
No. So no. Wait. No. I think your view is going to commit you to saying pi doesn't exist because we only have an understanding of pi.
No. Pi exists because you've just communicated the concept and I've understood it. Pi
Okay.
exists.
So let's say, what if I say there's an irrational number that's exactly between pi and the square root of e? Does that number exist?
I'm not a mathematician capable of, well, I'm not a mathematician at all, so I just don't know what you've just said. You've just communicated something equivalent to.
Okay, cool. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say we take a number like pi that has infinite non-repeating digits, and I take a number like the square root of 2, or I take another number that's the same thing. It's also a bunch of just infinite non-repeating digits, and I talk about the midpoint between those two numbers.
Uh,
Would you agree? When I talk about that midpoint, am I communicating information about a number or about
well,
something that doesn't exist?
I'm not even tracking what you're trying to communicate to me now. Like, dude, I'm so bad at maths, I can just about do the square root of 25. That was actually that was actually a bit of an effort for me when I said that earlier. I was so crap at maths. But we need to be a bit more layman with me doing the actual
Okay,
mathematical
cool.
equations.
So
I'm more interested in the metaphysics of mathematics rather than mathematics itself.
okay, let me just backtrack then. So if I talk about pi, you're agreeing that I can communicate the concept of pi, even though I can't conceptualize the exact number, right? Or I can't conceptualize the number exactly except by talking about what it refers to, or the way the number behaves, or how it relates to other numbers.
Well, you've communicated something to me. I know what pi is. I'm visualizing the symbol right now, and I know when I go to Google and type in pi, it's going to be 3.14 something. I think it's 3.145 something. If I'm not mistaken, it's been years since I've looked at what pi is. But yeah, you can tell me pi. I'll be like, oh yeah, I know what pi is. It's something, isn't it? You divide the circumference. I can't remember what it is exactly, but yeah, that's how bad at maths I am. But yeah, I see the little symbol in my mind. I can go to Google, type it in, and Google will tell me some amount of digits of pi, right? And then I can look at the number of pi and be like, yeah, now I understand the what is conveyed by the number pi more accurately, right? Before I just had this vague concept of 3.14 something. But now I've got a more accurate representation of what that's supposed to mean. But to say that there exists pi somewhere, right? The pi is lurking behind the circle. Like there exists hidden within the circle. If only we could we could strip back the curtain of the circle and reveal the true pi hidden within. Like, if you want to argue that, please provide evidence of the reality of numbers in that way, and I'd be very interested to hear that.
Okay, wait. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that your view, or the standard that you're using for when a number has been sufficiently conceptualized to be said to exist, would actually just seem to exclude pi from ever existing because it can never be completely communicated.
Well, the concept of what pi represents,
Right. Okay. So
the
let's
concept
be
of the
clear. So we
unicorn,
have a concept. I'm sorry.
the concept of the unicorn exists, right? We can talk about it. You understand what I say when I talk about the unicorn kidney bizarre example, right?
Okay, but
Despite
so
the fact it doesn't
numbers
exist.
are conceptual. The numbers are conceptual.
Right, yeah,
So
because
when we
you've
say we
already.
have a concept of a number, we're saying then by the definitions you're using, the number is going to exist.
No, wait. So what you're there's a conflation happening, right? So what's happening here is we're talking about the concept of pi, and my understanding of it is 3.14, and that will do. If I need to do some pi equation, I'll just times it by 3.14 because I'm dumb and I don't know the more digits. But if you then say, do you know the number of pi or something like it? Does the number of pi exist? If it's infinitely long,
Mm.
and nobody's worked that out, which they haven't done, because if it's infinitely long, it can't be possibly worked out, then the true number of pi has not been established. It doesn't exist. There is no true infinite pi which currently exists. We have the concept of pi, right? We have the concept of infinity, but we don't have an existent infinity.
Okay, cool. And so what that standard for or what that standard for establishing the existence of a number seems to also commit is the idea that, let's say, the radius of a circle is, I don't know, 3. And there actually just is no fact of the matter. Like, there is no number that represents the circumference of that circle, since it would be the ratio of it would be a number that does exist times a non-existent quantity.
If you show me a circle and say the radius of this circle is 3,
Okay.
and ask me what is the circumference, I'll be like, I don't know. Why are you
All
asking
right.
me?
Well, so
Answer
what
that.
you're committed to is the fact that there is no circumference.
For me, there's no circumference right now. For you, there might be.
Okay.
You might have worked it out.
Oh, no, because I can't have worked it out because it would require an infinite amount of time. So not only is there no circumference for me, but there's not even in principle, there can't even possibly be such a thing as the circumference of a circle.
Well, there can't be in principle something like an infinite number of the circumference that we have that exists, right? There can't exist an infinite number um, that that we could conceptualize. So if you agree, right? So you've already agreed that numbers are not real. Like you have agreed to an anti-realist conception of numeracy already, right? Unless you want to concede that, or unless you want to go back on that, and then we can then go looking for evidence, which I think is going to be a wild goose chase. But with an anti-realist conception of numbers, you're committed to that view as well. Like there's no you can't say. I'm not saying the circumference doesn't exist, right? I can measure the circumference with a ruler, not with a ruler, with like a tape measure, right? And then I could say, oh yeah, the circumference is like I don't know, like 7 or something, um, right? And
Okay, now just to be clear though, if the circumference is 7, like if we have a rational number as either the circumference or the radius, then we're going to have an irrational number for the other value based on what pi is. And
right,
so
so
what you're committed to in every case, like there's no circle that has both a radius and also a circumference on your view.
when I measure a circle, that like an existent circle, let's say I've got a tree log and I measure the circumference, and I say, oh, the circumference of this tree log is 50 centimeters, and then I measure the diameter, and I'm like, oh, well, the diameter is I don't know 20 centimeters, let's say. Um, I have provided a circumference and a diameter. But if you want to say no, in the abstract realm of geometry, we need the infinite application of pi digits, and then we can create the true circumference. Then I'm just going to be like, okay, well, you can't do that. So what you want about? Right? That is not to say that there exists hidden in the log this infinite number, which is the circumference. That's that's just silly land unless you want to go into pure geometry, but then we have to have some cutoff point because we can't calculate it. So then you're committed to the view of saying we can't even do geometry. Your view commits you to not being able to do geometry and basic stuff like measuring a circumference.
Right. So what it commits us to doing, if we agree that pi is a coherent concept and pi is the ratio of circumference to diameter, then we're necessarily committed to saying, since irrational numbers don't exist, there can't be any number that describes the circumference of a circle that has a rational number for its diameter.
Have you
And
ever calculated the circumference using the full digits of pi?
nobody has.
Is it incalculable?
Yes, it's incalculable.
Exactly. So
Okay.
so you're trying to like run a reductio on me, which you're running reduction on everyone, every mathematician who's ever lived. It's like, okay, right, we don't have infinite access to pi, right? Next.
All right. So what? Okay. I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is that most people would say, even if we don't have infinite access, there's still a sense in which there is a true fact of what the ratio is. Like there is a true fact of what the diameter is of this circle, or what the circumference is of this circle, whatever.
What you're saying, like there's a fact of the matter. Let's say
But
on
let
Mars,
me.
on Mars there was a grain of sand which moved somewhere, and no one knew about this, but there was a fact of the matter of this grain of sand moving, right? That's the sort of realm that you're going into now. And I'm just gonna say, if there is no knowledge of this, there's no epistemological access possible to this, then you're either gonna have to provide a refutation of idealism, which is going to be a wild goose chase, or you're going to have to give up the fact of the matterness that you're trying to access in noumenal reality.
Okay, cool. So let me move on to my second reductio, which I think might be a little bit more powerful. But it's also a little bit easier to butcher when I talk about it. So bear with me here. So let's say we're talking about a function, or we're talking about the relationship between the size or the quantity that's being specified by a number and the amount of bits of information that we need to specify that number. So let's say we could just think of it in terms of like binary and say that if we have a number like 1, that takes 1 bit, 2 and 3 are going to take 2 bits, so on and so on. So that we can see how, as we go up, we're going to need more and more bits of information to specify a number. But depending on the encoding scheme that we use, it's not necessarily just going to be a monotonic increase. Like let's say if we were talking about encoding numbers using scientific notation, then for me to talk about a number like 10 to the power of 77, that would require only so much information. But then if I want to talk about 10 to the power of 77 minus 1, I'm actually requiring more information to talk about the immediate predecessor of a number than to talk about the actual number itself. Would you agree with that?
I see what you're saying here.
Okay.
I,
So,
I think I understand the concept you're trying to convey, and how does
so
that relate to the proposition?
the concept, I'm going to get there in a minute. So the proposition, or the concept I'm trying to convey is this. There are some situations where we have a number that can be communicated using n bits of information, but where the immediate predecessor of that number, like that number minus 1, would require at least n plus 1 bits of information.
Mm.
Is that fair?
Like if this is some sort of mathematical function, like I could, so some computer function, I imagine I could just write a script that did what you're saying, and it would spit out a number, and I would look at the number and be like, oh, that's a number. Like,
Okay, cool.
I don't understand where it's going.
So let's say that we're approaching the absolute limits of the largest number that is conceptualizable. It actually seems fairly likely, especially if we're using sort of like powerful encoding schemes. Like if we're using something, I mean, we'll just say for the sake of argument, we're using scientific notation to talk about really big numbers. And we're getting to the point of the limit for how many bits of information we can reasonably communicate.
Mm.
It would seem very likely, actually it's effectively inevitable, that this largest communicable number is going to have a number directly before it. Like, let's say, just for the sake of argument, again, let's say that it was a Google. And once we talked about a Google, which is 10 to the power of 100, we were just out of information. We would also, therefore, be out of information, or we wouldn't have any extra information that would let us specify what what a Google minus 1 is. So we would have a situation where a particular number exists and is specifiable, but it would have no predecessor. Like it wouldn't be the successor of any other number.
So, like, I see where you're going, but you're
Yes.
making a bit of an error here because you've specified it. You've just specified it to me. You said largest number that
Well,
we can
have I
communicate minus
specified it?
1. You've just specified it.
Have I specified it? If there's
It's
no
n
fact
minus
of the
1.
matter.
It's n minus 1.
Okay. I mean, the issue here is that to have communicated n, then by definition, we would have already had no more ability
Yeah,
to
but
communicate more information.
if you
And
pump out a large number on the computer screen and it's so big no one can conceptualize it, but we can refer to it. We can refer to it by giving it a name, right? So the same way, I
wait, so
don't
this,
know.
I'm just want to be clear. This line of critique that you're using would be valid if you weren't taking the mathematical non-realism route.
No, it's perfectly
Because
compatible.
if we're going to say that numbers don't exist unless they're conceptualized to a sufficiently significant degree, then you're actually not. It's actually not the case that you're specifying the number by saying the number that can't be specified. You're actually not specifying anything since you haven't conceptualized what it is.
Oh, look, if we've got a conceptualization which is the largest number possible, and then you say the largest number that we can possibly do -1, you've communicated that concept. If we're going to say that the actual reality of that number, that there's actually a fact of the matter of the reality of that number, well, we haven't communicated a number, we've communicated a concept. Like, I don't know what the number is. No one knows what the number is. The number doesn't exist in anyone's mind. It's not like no one. It's not accessible to anyone. We just know that the abstract concept, largest possible calculable number, that a computer can do, -1. Okay, I get that, right? I get that concept. I get the concept. You communicated the concept, but the number itself, there's we can't look inside the computer mainframe and be, oh yeah, we found the number, right? We don't say, look over here, there it is. Can't you see it? Like, where is the number, right? Where is it?
Okay, cool. So the point that I'm trying to make, which I think is being glossed over a little bit, is that whatever the function is for the biggest number we can conceptualize, I think you've already agreed to this. Like, for instance, we are humans, we have an easier time conceptualizing like multiples of 10. So there are probably going to be situations where there's a number, like a pretty big number, that I can conceptualize because it's so simple in terms of like being some particular multiple of 10. Like, it's just a 1 with so many zeros after it. So that I can conceptualize that number, but that number has a predecessor that can't be conceptualized. And what your view would commit you to in that situation is that we have a number that exists that has mainly non-existent predecessors, right?
Um, you're communicating it to me now, right? Whatever.
Okay, wait. I'm communicating it to you, but I'm not communicating it in a way that allows it to exist.
Right, the number itself doesn't exist. The abstract concept of what we're trying to convey exists. And I've got no
Okay,
problem with that. Googleplex exists as a concept. I can't conceptualize it. There's no number in my head that exists of a Googleplex other than just the concept Google, right? And when I think of the number 7, the number in my head, I can see various different conceptualizations of 7. I can see the Roman numeral 7. I can see the normal character we use for 7. I can see 7 apples in my head. I can see 7 grapes. And I can see 7 dots. There's not much more I can do with that. But whatever we want to refer to when we're talking about numbers is encapsulated by those representations in my mind. And when we talk about a Google, whatever representation that is in my mind, you've communicated it and I've understood it. I know what you mean by that. And when you say this computer can pump out some some integer which is so large, that you'll just look at it and be like, wow, that's a large number. Well, I'll look at it and say, wow, that's a large number, right? And I'm just going to call that large number. You've communicated large number. But if you say, no, what actually is the number? I have no idea. It's too long for me to conceptualize. But if you're going to say that number really does exist, where is it lurking, right? So then I'm just going to refer back to the 4 propositions,
okay. Let
and
me
you can
actually
reject
stop you.
one of them.
Footsoldier, I concede that line of argumentation.
Okay, well, that seems to
So,
be a concession of the debate prop, right?
well, I mean, the only way at that point for me not to concede would be to argue mathematical realism. Or
Right.
I guess I could take another route and argue that we have this sort of like language game of like mathematical axioms, and say that when we talk about the realness of a number, we're talking about sort of a particular number having a position or having a particular like role in the language game. So I think in theory I could take that kind of route too.
Yeah, but I've been
Look,
using the Wittgensteinian conceptualization of numeracy the whole time in the debate. So
I mean, I'm not sure about that exactly.
well, like when you communicate your mouth noises to me that form the concept of 7 apples in my mind, you've successfully communicated sevenness to me, whatever representation my mind interprets that as being. I can then write down the representation on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, send it to you back on the internet, and you'll read it out and be like, oh, that's the number 7. So you'll then be able to pair that up with your own conceptualization of the number 7 and my representation of the number 7 and say that it corresponds. That's completely fine to do. But if we're going to say no, um, when I wrote it down on a piece of paper, I imparted sevenness into the paper and I created a subsistent entity, or I created some real entity of real sevenness somewhere. And I would just like push for like some evidence of that, which I don't think we're gonna go down the goose chase of doing, right?
Okay. Well, I mean, so what I'm saying here when I talk about a game is that we have a game that sort of has its own rule or has its own sort of definition of existing. And just says something like, well, okay, there exists a number 0, and for every number, there exists a successor of that number. And so in that way, we are talking about, like, we're ascribing the semantic concept of existence under this particular definition to an infinite number of things, just as, like I said, as the rules of a game. And that's what I'm talking about.
Right. I didn't fully get that, but yeah, you can say the word infinite to me, and I understand what you mean by it. So I've got no problem there, man.
Right. So,
Well,
so what I'm saying, let's say that I just take, let's just say I take the line that 0 exists, and I take the sort of the schema that for every number that exists, including 0, there exists a number that is the immediate successor of that number.
this is like axiomatic set theory, right?
Well, it's arithmetic, not set theory though.
Well,
But
like
yeah,
you could say that
basically,
there's an empty set, and the one thing in there is nothing. So then we've got 1, right? And then we put that in the set, and then we've got the nothing, and we've got the 1, so we've got 2.
no. So what I'm saying, we're just saying, okay, well, 0 exists. The immediate successor of 0, commonly referred to as 1, exists. And we're taking just a general rule of inference that says anytime n exists, n plus 1 exists. And that is just, in this case, the concept of existence, what existence means for numbers, is just semantically defined by these sort of axioms.
What you've done is you've communicated to me an abstract concept which I can follow, but
Okay,
I
so
can apply
what I'm
this with
saying,
numbers in my mind. So I can apply that with 7. I can do 8, 9, 10, 11. I can count up to maybe. Well, I think who was it? Mr. Beast. I think he counted to 1,000,000 or something on a live stream. It took him like 24 hours or something. It sounds ridiculous. Like you can count as much as you want, right? But up to a certain point, then you're just gonna stop being able to track it, and it's just gonna be according to your like mathematic.
okay, no.
wi-
So I think
wi-
I
ability.
think I'm talking past you a little bit. What I'm
No,
saying
no,
is
no.
that
I think
this
I understand what
definition
you're
of
saying.
existence is an alternative to the definition of existence that would seem to require a human to be thinking about a particular number for it to exist.
Right, look, I
And I
understand what you're
think,
saying here, but what I'm saying is when we count to 1,000,000, we're able to conceptualize, like understand the numbers that we're using, right? And we can represent them using terminology like 1,000,000 or 100,000, or we can have that in our mind. We can think £1,000,000 in the bank account. We know what we can buy with £1,000,000. But when we start getting to like numbers so large we can't conceptualize it anymore, they're not these numbers don't exist in our mind. We're just left with the
okay,
residual
so
abstract
I'm
conceptualization.
agreeing that they don't exist in our mind, except just in the sense that they are implied. Like, say, their existence is implied by things that we do believe.
We can say that, could we conceptualize this number, it would exist in my mind, but I'm unable to conceptualize it. So the number doesn't exist, but the abstract reference to it exists, but it doesn't obtain to anything. I'm okay with saying that.
So you would be fine. Now, what I'm asking specifically is, are you okay with saying that if existence is defined in this particular way, like it's specifically just defined? Well, let's say we're going to say, okay, existence, insofar as we're talking about numbers, insofar as we're talking about natural numbers, is just explicitly defined in terms of like piano arithmetic. Like it's explicitly defined as just an abstract predicate that's said to apply to zero. Zero has the predicate of existence that applies to it. And also, well, and we're also saying, okay, well, this concept of existence doesn't require anyone to think about it. It's just a predicate. It applies to zero. And then the predicate also by inference applies to 1. And the predicate also implies to 2. And we can see by induction that this predicate of existence for numbers is going to apply to an infinite amount of numbers. Would you accept that line of argumentation as being at least coherent?
I was unable to track what you meant by that. So there's a truth value of existence indexed to natural numbers starting from 0 and going up n+1 ad infinitum. At some point, we're going to say the existence stops in our mind because we can't conceptualize the number. However, it continues as an abstract referent to some possible thing which maybe we could try and get our heads around. But
So what I'm saying,
we can still refer to it. We can still refer to whatever is trying to be referred to, but the actual understanding of what the number means is no longer there. We don't understand the number anymore. We can
yeah.
just refer
So
to an
what I'm
abstract
saying is
concept.
that
We can refer to an abstract concept of it, right?
yes. So what I'm saying is under this definition of what it means for a number to exist, then there's not even, we could even just grant that it's like mind independent, or we could even just grant that it's fictional. But under this definition of what it means for a number to exist, which I think is going to be superior for just practical reasons to your definition. Under this definition, then there's just clearly no need for us to be able to conceptualize a number to say that that number exists.
I think we're going around in circles, man. I think we've addressed this a lot. I'm just gonna push
Okay, wait.
you
Well,
on these
I don't
propositions.
know that we're going around in circles because I think we just started talking about this. Like I'm saying, what if I say, actually, this is just like existential quantifier. Like if I say, just as a semantic rule of a language game we're playing, that there exists a number 0. And as another semantic rule or another like syntactic rule, whatever, of this language game that we're playing, for every number to which this concept of existence applies, there's a number 1 greater than that number to which the concept of existence also applies. And when we talk about existence of numbers in this way, then obviously there's no necessity for a human to be conceptualizing a number at any given time for that number to be said to exist.
Well, the number can only exist in the language game if it's communicable in the linguistic community, right? In a Wittgensteinian view, like, because I see that you're trying to attack it from a Wittgensteinian perspective, but what does it mean? If you're going to attack from a Wittgensteinian perspective, you'd also have to hold Wittgensteinian
So this is
presuppositions, like, for example, the limits of our language are the limits of our world, and if you start trying to say stuff which we can't refer to, like the debate proposition is saying that natural numbers that we can't specifically refer to. If we can't refer to it within the context of a language game, then it doesn't exist within the context of the language game because it can't be referred to. And the limits of a language are the limits of our world. So, from a linguistic, from a Wittgensteinian perspective, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you try and take that line of reasoning.
Just to be clear, it is within the limits of our linguistic world because we've just had like an hour-long conversation about it.
Well, can you
The
give
thing that's
one
not
example
so
of,
the
can you
thing
give
that
me a single example of something that we can't refer to?
By definition, no. But I can
Exactly.
give you infinitely many examples.
Exactly. So it cannot take place
So
in the context of a language, a Wittgensteinian sense of a language game. It can take place outside of it, but then you're going to have to prove the realism of numbers.
okay. So let's say that I want to say. Let's say that I want to say that because a particular atom, like if I say like they're like because I have no perception of like any of the atoms that make up my body, we can say that none of those atoms exist in my world. Would you agree with that?
I assume that you're made up of a large amount of atoms.
But no specific atom. Like we can't pick out any specific atom.
That for
Talk about that one atom.
there exists no no epistemic access for me your specific atoms in your body. I'm not saying that the I can say you're comprised of atoms, right? So that's perfectly acceptable within a linguistic community to say
So
that you're comprised of
if I want to
atoms. But I don't know what it means to say that this specific atom here feels this way or something like that. That's just nonsense to me.
oh wait. So I'm not talking about an atom feeling in a particular way. I'm gonna say, well, like if I want to talk about the collective of the atoms of my body, I can do that. But I can't talk about any particular atom because I
Well, I
have no
don't
way
know.
of specifying it against all the other atoms. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would just be. It would just be an unintelligible conversation if you were going to start talking about specific atoms. It would just be
Right. Yeah. So
incoherent.
no, that's fair. I'm affirming that. So let's
Right.
say it's unintelligible to talk about specific atoms, but we're not going to want to say that our inability to talk about them means they don't exist, because as a collective, they clearly exist, and we clearly can conceptualize them as a collective.
Yeah, but I can conceptualize one single atom, but I don't know what you mean if you're going to point to
Well, no,
this
so
atom in
you
my
can't.
body here and this and that does this. I'm not like a biologist or a particle physicist, so I'm just going to be lost. The communication is not going to be of a good quality. It will be incoherent to me. Like when you say that I'm comprised of atoms, I'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. I think I trust that the particle physicists aren't lying to us, right? And I would imagine you're comprised of a very large amount of atoms, but that's about the limit of the conversation, right?
Okay. So what I'm granting, right? I am trying to grant that we're gonna say it's incoherent to talk about a specific atom. Like if I want to say, if I wanted for some reason to talk about a particular atom, that's one of the atoms that makes up like my body or my computer or whatever. There
Well,
would be no
I
way
just
for me.
wouldn't know. I couldn't conceptualize where that's located. But if you're going to say, "Oh, there's an atom in my body somewhere," I'll be like, "Yeah, okay, sure. There's one in mine too."
And so you would
I can
agree,
conceptualize an atom. I just don't. I don't know what it would look like really. It
right?
would be like some spinny thing. Or, I don't
But
know.
surely you would agree that the atom exists, and it exists even.
Yeah, I'm assuming it does exist. Yeah, right. Unless
Right.
we've been lied to by a scientist. I'm just believing that it does exist. Yeah, I've never seen one.
So not only does it exist, but we can say it does exist in our sort of linguistic world because it's implied.
Yeah, but you could just whip out a huge microscope and say, "Look, here's an atom." I'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're right. There it is." You can't
Okay.
do that with numbers. How are you going to whip out a microscope and show me a number?
I mean, we're already granting the existence of at least some numbers, right?
We can grant the
We're granting the existence of any number
a
that is
language game.
currently, let me just say that we're granting, even under your view, we're granting that any number that can be specifically conceptualized and is being specifically conceptualized at this exact moment of time exists. But what your view is going to commit us to is something like, if I'm thinking about the number 10 exists, but none of the other numbers that would comprise 10, like say the numbers 1 through 9. While we're having a conversation about 10, 1 through 9 don't exist, even though they're straightforwardly implied by the existence of number 10. And in the same way, if we want to apply that logic, and just to be clear, we're specifically talking about, when we say existence, we're talking about existence in terms of like existing in the shared space of language. If we wanted to talk about, say, I don't know, like we're going to talk about my computer or whatever, then we're sort of implicitly acknowledging if I have a computer, my computer is made out of atoms, that there's a large number of atoms that are being referred to when I talk about my computer. And even though we're not actually able to refer to any specific atom, it would be fairly absurd to try to say that those atoms don't exist or that those atoms aren't being referred to. They're just being referred to non-specifically.
Look, can you think of a six-legged horse? Have you got that picture in your mind?
Sure.
Did that horse exist before I asked you to think of it?
I don't think it exists after.
Right, because you're
I
thinking
think
about it.
it never existed, right? So the disanalogy there is that we're saying numbers exist in virtue of being conceptualized.
Well, let's say in 20
But
years when you're
grant
no
that.
longer thinking of you're no longer thinking of the six-legged horse in 20 years, and then someone comes up to you and asks you again, think of a six-legged horse, and you're like, yep, I'm doing that now. And they say, does it exist in your mind? You say, yep, it does. And you say, does it exist in your mind before? You say, no, because you've forgotten about it, right? Then it didn't exist in your mind between the two times. It simply wasn't in your mind at the time, right? So it wasn't in existence, right? So you can apply the same thing with numbers. Of course, the numbers exist when I'm thinking of it. You say, oh, well, between the numbers 1 and 10, there are the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Well, I've just named them, so they exist, right? Because I'm thinking of them right now in my mind. But if we're gonna say, like, if I'm in like in the middle of the night dreaming, right, and not thinking about numbers, numbers don't exist in my mind, right? And if they don't exist in my mind, where are they? Are they under my bed? Where are they? And you haven't affirmed realism, numeric realism. You're rolling with numeric anti-realism. So I don't know why you're trying to argue against this. It's like you're arguing against what you've already affirmed.
All right. So, what I'll honestly, I'll go ahead and concede to you that my argument at this point is fairly semantic, and I think I have a good semantic argument in favor of interpreting the existence of numbers in a particular way, because I do think it's a little bit absurd if you want to say a number, like you would have to say a number exists, but its predecessor doesn't exist. But
Right.
given, I think, I'll be honest with you, given the rules, or given the sort of, what is it? Given the, what do you call it? The
Goalpost?
condition, yeah. Given the goalpost that we set out at the beginning, which I did agree to, I think I will have to say that I have lost the debate.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, I do highly value your intellectual honesty there, and it's always good to have a good debate where we can sort of say, yeah, within the bounds of the goalpost, yeah, we have met the condition. So, cool. That's great, man. Thanks.
Yeah, great debate, guys. I always appreciate you both. Always appreciate the content. It was a really great debate. So I guess there's no need to put it to a vote as concession was made.
Yeah, so I just want to say this though. I know like a lot of people don't like the concession, but me and Footsoldier had this conversation beforehand. It's like we were specifically agreeing that we would go ahead and concede under some set of circumstances. Like that was what we were going to try to go for.
What we could do though, we could still like put out a vote, right, and see how it would have gone, right, and we could see if it would have diverged from the concession, because this is what I've sort of been moaning about recently, is that when I see that I've satisfied a debate, sort of like the goalposts have been satisfied, then I lose nonetheless. So yeah, we could put it to a vote just to see, but like I would say, yeah, that for me that's a concession. Like I would say, like if we were gonna say like award the win or the whatever, then I'd say yeah, that's a concession. But if we wanted to sort of like do a mock poll, like it'd be interested to see if you won. I guess then you would.
Yeah, we can do that if you want. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Were you guys thinking like a mock up and down voting poll?
Yeah,
Sure.
because I guess people wanted to vote, right? And I guess like my sort of inclination would be that Spaz would win, but I don't know. Let's see.
Well, I don't know. I think your case was actually pretty good. Like, it's a lot better than It's definitely not what I expected. What I expected was just sort of the